So let me get this straight. This is a movie about a son of a preacher whose music has the ability to profoundly affect people, and yet, not once does the soundtrack use Son of a Preacher Man? Abject failure, 0 out of 10. This movie's great. Despite at times an overabundance of characters, the performances are all fantastic. Even though it's an entirely unnecessary flex, Michael B. Jordan gives a great dual performance as both Smoke and Stack. You can always tell them apart just by their stance alone. And never at any point does it feel obnoxious in the same way something like The Flash did. Haley Steinfeld and Wunmi Mosaku are great in anything and everything. Miles Caton is incredibly heartfelt and vulnerable throughout. Denroy Lindo is endlessly charming. Even the really minor characters, like Omar Benson as Cornbread, manages to be very charismatic and memorable with very few lines. Though despite being a corn-fed fool with a lot of muscle mass, Bullhorn does not get up in his ass. I know, I was disappointed too. The music is obviously outstanding. This is the same guy who did the Black Panther movies, so it would be good, but goddamn, even with those expectations in mind, this will blow you away. There is a specific scene in particular that will just eviscerate you. It is genuinely one of the most powerful scenes in cinematic history. Just this encapsulation of absolute freedom and joy, so powerful that the constraints of space and time no longer matter. Phenomenal. Speaking of that scene, it and the entire movie are shot incredibly. In particular, a tracking shot in the aforementioned scene that is incredible in how much it manages to capture and convey without coming across as sensory overload. It does an incredible job shifting tone at a moment's notice, going from light and comedic to incredibly tense to really heartfelt, without any of the emotions feeling forced. The way it mixes different folklores and ideas into one narrative without being confusing is a fantastic achievement. That being said, this movie is not perfect, and there is unfortunately some bad stuff that drags down the phenomenal stuff. Namely, they should have used Son of a Preacher Man. I don't care that it would have been anachronistic. I don't care that it wouldn't have fit this movie's tone. I don't care that it would have been obnoxiously blunt. It would have worked so well thematically in this movie, and yes, I will die on this hill, hands covered in the blood of those who would disagree. But if you think otherwise, yeah, fair enough. Besides that personal peeve, the big problem with this movie is it's too bloated. There are so many ideas and so many characters and so many different arcs trying to play out here, and a lot of them aren't given space to properly develop. By the time I got to the end, I forgot what the main premise was, which is a shame because the main premise is masterful and the execution of it is amazing, and there are definitely weaker aspects that could have been cut to make space for the stronger elements. In particular, this movie spends way too long playing around with some very stereotypical horror tropes, and it doesn't do anything clever or insightful enough with them to justify their inclusion, over focusing on its more interesting aspects. There are a couple of other problems. It struggles to keep track of its own rules, leading to some contrivances you have to overlook. It doesn't quite find the balance between comedy and seriousness, leading one character to feel more like a cartoon than a real man. It tries to play with this ambiguous villain idea, but contradicts it with some really blunt dialogue, making the villain ultimately feel kind of weak, especially in comparison to everything else. Also, everyone seems to be loving the post-credits scene, but I kind of hate it. It felt quite unnecessary, and even almost sequel-baity. I kept half expecting someone to say, "I'm putting together a team." But overall, these are very minor complaints that I've spent way too long talking about in comparison to how much great stuff there is in this movie. It is still an outstanding movie. It just slightly loses focus on what makes it such an outstanding movie, especially in its middle act. 8 out of 10. If you thought any of this was at all insightful and for some godforsaken reason want more, check out the Ink and Action podcast, where me and my co-host Mouse compare comics, movies and TV shows that are vaguely related to see which one we like more. Plus subscribe, like, comment your thoughts about Sinners, perhaps all the good stuff I forgot to talk about, or don't, the world is your lobster after all.